Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight I want to welcome Alfred Labremont Webre. He is the founder of the science of exopolitics through his book Exopolitics, and discovered the Omniverse as the third major cosmological body through which humanity understands the cosmos, the development of the positive future equation, and the ascension hypothesis that describes soul development in our universe and Omniverse. He has served in leadership positions in environmental protection, international law and justice, public health, exopolitics, and public broadcasting. Mr. Webre, welcome. How are you tonight?
You know, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to our program.
Yes, me too. And thanks for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. You've done some fascinating research into our existence, the universe, the Omniverse, how our consciousness interacts with it, and all the possibilities of life outside our planet and how we could possibly interact with them. But you also have a fascinating background. So let's start there. Just tell us a little bit more about your background and what got you started down your path.
Well, I would call it kind of almost two parallel paths that at a certain point in 1973 joined up. and one parallel path would be that because of my background, I was privileged to get an education at the time, and to get a good education and to start off in a professional field at a very exciting time, at least in my own mind. And so toward the end of 1972, I was the general counsel of the Environmental Protection Administration of the City of New York, just at the time that the whole environmental consciousness was coming in. People were beginning to understand that we live on a being Gaia. The Earth is actually a conscious being. It's not just this piece of rock that's floating around a bunch of other pieces of rock, at least for advanced consciousness, and that we have to treat it that way, and that we're in balance and we're part of a consciousness that is, we're in this ecology of dimensions. And so toward the end of 1972, then I began to read in the multidimensional, began to read in multidimensional areas, and began to feel like the 3D solutions that straight politics was offering was not going to lead toward a solution that was going to be successful for our generation at the time. And I think that that's something that each generation, as it sort of comes of age, feels. When they start to hit their 30s, they start to get young families. They just see, wait a minute, this isn't quite what we thought it was going to be. Things have to change, really. And I began to read books like Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain, because there was still the communism versus capitalism, Soviet Union type of thing, and other books that talked about the multidimensional world. And toward the end of 1973, my immediate boss and then the mayor, John Lindsay, decided to run for U.S. president, and my immediate boss decided to run for mayor of New York. And I didn't want to go forward inside the political paradigm because I thought it was dualistic, duality consciousness. I win, you lose. And it's more of a win-win type of consciousness. That we're all working on a big problem, so let's all put in our individual pieces, and I have a different philosophy that way. I would just happen to be watching this evening. Today's Thursday, September 12th, 2019, and I'm a dual citizen of the United States and of Canada. My mother, she is her father was a Canadian Chisholm, and that's an honorable Scottish name. And there's even a Chisholm Street up here in Vancouver. And my father, on my father's side, we go back to John Alden, who came over on the Mayflower and was the lieutenant governor of the Plymouth colony. So I'm descended from him. So I've got all these different sides. And tonight, just so happened by coincidence, they had both the debate for Prime Minister of Canada on at the same time that they had a debate for the Democratic candidates debating for President of the United States. So I spent the evening switching back and forth, and you go to each one, and they're these incredibly talented people, and they all have brilliant ideas, and it's all I win, you lose, and you feel such a sense. What if they were just a way to have everybody working together to add it all together instead of subtracting it all together, where seems like such a waste. There's such a waste of time in this duality system. Anyway, so I didn't want to go forward in politics, and I happened to meet just through a family connection at the beginning of 1973, a gentleman who was a professor at Rutgers University, a professor of experimental psychology, who was also an expert in extraterrestrial studies. So, wow, all of a sudden I got interested in extraterrestrial studies, and I decided, something, I'm not going to do the usual thing. The usual thing is that you either go into a presidential campaign, or you go into a mayoral campaign, or you go into a law firm, or you do, something inside that I win, you lose paradigm. I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to go and do what I want to do, which has to do with the multidimensional world, because that's what I was really interested in. So I left government behind and that whole I win, you lose paradigm, and I just went forward. And beginning of February 1973, I had my first multidimensional experience, which is now written up in a book. It's online. You can get it on Amazon, or you can get it at universebooks.com. That's where all my books are, at universebooks.com. It's called My Journey Landing Heaven on Earth. Now, that's a big fancy title, right? But what happened that night was pretty fancy, because all of a sudden I had a multidimensional experience, both in 3D and at another level. I was taken up into an extraterrestrial spaceship, and I was witnessed there. I actually have a witness, another human being who witnessed me there, so it's not just me kind of making stuff up. And that kind of shifted everything. It's like my life before that and my life after that. And that's what set me on the course of exopolitics, because that was my first exopolitical experience. And I can talk a lot about that and what happened after that, but that basically, that happened in a night in February 1973, was like, it took me, who would otherwise have been another guy in the, on the fast lane of public policy, politics, legal, environmental, all that stuff, and put me in a different category. And so that's how it all started. It was really outside of anything that I had ever conceived. And it was an exopolitical encounter with another civilization that was multi-dimensional. And the rest, it took me into another level of relationship with the universe and with consciousness. So that's what happened to me.
That's very fascinating. Did these contact experiences continue after that throughout your life?
In a manner of speaking, although very different, because it's not so much that I had what we call an adduction experience. It's not an abduction, but rather the term is adduction, where you're taken to the stars. You're kind of given an exo-consciousness experience, because it was ethical extraterrestrials, and their purpose was more consciousness expansion, and their mission is to try to evolve this planet out of duality consciousness, where the civilization and the leaders here are into I win, you lose, wars and all that kind of thing, and more into a more conscious, we are one, which is unity consciousness, which is oneness with the planet, oneness with the universe, oneness with creation, and developing the unity with the Creator that's inside of us, inside of all of us. And so it shifted, and so it's like I'm more in sync with a life mission with many different advanced civilizations that are here, that are more or less along the same route. So because I became an exopolitician, that is a person who observes ET contact, well, I would come into contact with ET contact. I would come into contact with contactees, and I may or may not have had contact. I would have had dreams. So, I sort of shifted into a new relationship. But this first experience was like, it's very marked, yeah. And I write about it in this book.
Now, I find it very interesting the way you describe the Omniverse. For those who aren't familiar, could you describe your idea of what the Omniverse is?
Sure. And I just want to say, this is how it is. If we go to the basics of universe, multiverse, omniverse, those are kind of the three major cosmological bodies through which we understand the cosmos. And the universe was, in this sort of phase of history, was first discovered by the Sumerian astronomers around 3500 BC, and and we're inside like a singularity, a holographic a holographic singularity of time, space, energy, and matter. And that's our universe. Now, an interdimensional source has given our universe the name Uversa. That doesn't mean that it's his name, but it could be. But to show you, if you go into the multidimensional world where our universe has a name, in science, they've barely given our galaxy a name, the Milky Way, and science doesn't even acknowledge that our universe might have a name, you know? And because science is barely creeping along to acknowledge or understand that the universe is teeming with life and is highly organized and has a government. It's like, you know, and now there are pockets like inner cores on the planet that understand that, but they've controlled that knowledge because they want to control it for power reasons, not because they're beneficent, but they want to control it for power. And they do it in secret societies. So our tradition, which is of open scholarship and public sources, comes out openly. So the universe is that. Now the next advance is the multiverse, and the multiverse was coined, that term was coined in 1895 by an American scientist named William James, and it means the totality of all of the universes. So we are in not the only universe. In fact, two Stanford scientists have estimated the number of universes, and it's, in their words, they actually use this word in a scientific paper, humongous. Is a humongous number of universes, and it's 10 to the 7th to the 7th. And so if you went to write out in longhand or to type it in 12-point type the number of universes, that number would be 260 million miles long, just the number of universes that exist. And there, we don't have a name for that number. And our human understanding, we can say, oh, that number is 260 million miles long, but for us to like comprehend that number the way that we can comprehend the number 10 is very, very difficult to do. Now, so then, what is the Omniverse? So we'll fast forward from 1895 to 2014. So what is the Omniverse, which is the next significant advance? Well, the Omniverse equation is as follows. Omniverse equals multiverse, in other words, the totality of all of the universes, plus the spiritual dimensions. Now, what are in the spiritual dimensions? Now, the spiritual dimensions have traditionally, at least under the current scientific canon and in our current sort of society, let's say 20th century society, just things have shifted now in the 21st century. The spiritual dimensions have always thought to be a matter of personal belief. That is, the spiritual dimensions equal the intelligent civilization of souls plus spiritual beings plus source or God is, what some societies call it gods, spiritual traditions. There are many different names. And that has now, because of new sciences that we have, such as parapsychology, we can develop replicable data and uniform protocols whereby we are dealing with the intelligent civilization of souls, the human soul, in a scientific way. And we're determining its scientific properties. We're determining the scientific properties of what we can call, quote, the afterlife, or, quote, the interlife, because it appears that reincarnation is a regularity, that is the continuation of consciousness after bodily death, and then an interlife period, and then the human soul coming again into this holographic singularity that we're here, and incarnating into these avatars or these vehicles are human bodies that are sort of our spacesuits by which we can navigate inside the time-space third dimension that we inhabit in this particular universe. And so there's a great deal of knowledge that way. And starting around 2010, there are a number of scholars and researchers. And in 2014, there were three independent researchers, scientists, who published independently, without having contact with each other, books and in-depth articles on the Omniverse. One was David Bertolacci, who published The Theory of the Omniverse. And then Wes Penray, another researcher, published a book on the Ka, that's K-H-A-A. That's a term, an Egyptian term, but it's an equivalent term for the Omniverse. And then your humble servant, myself, also published my first book on the Omniverse in 2014. And that is a phenomenon that happens sometimes with new discoveries happen. You'll have people in different parts of the world discover the same thing at the same time. It's like they're bringing down knowledge from, different places, and they'll have those aha moments and, bring it down. So we're just at the beginnings of understanding the science of the Omniverse, and what this means, in the overall scheme of things, is sort of the integration of science and spirituality. Spirituality has always been not only a matter of belief, but a matter of insight, but also a matter of science, because people have understood that the universe, for example, is built around sacred geometry, and that there's all these scientific principles. And then all of this is beginning to gel, where one can then begin to treat that body, the spiritual dimensions, which seems to be creating and maintaining the universes of time, energy, space, and matter, from higher scientific principles, we're now bringing that into an understanding from the scientific point of view, not so much from the faith or belief point of view. And I have a new book coming out, my third book on the Omniverse at the beginning of 2020, called The Emergence of the Omniverse. And that's going to treat more that I think we're now reaching a phase where the Omniverse is going to emerge much more into human view. Right now, it's sort of this arcane thing, you know. There are a few books written about it. You know, there's discussion of it. And then hopefully it'll start to take hold in the same ways that the universe and the multiverse started to emerge in 1895. Well, now the Omniverse is starting to emerge, and that is the moment that we're in now. And that's a very important moment, because I think that it's a moment that signifies the beginning of our coming of age as a planet, and that might be synchronous with, and there are a lot of signs of this, of our linking up with and making contact, open contact as a civilization with the universe, you know, with the galactic community of peaceful worlds. And in my terms as an exopolitician would be with, for example, the Regional Galactic Governance Council, that we know people can go to my books, Exopolitics, or my earlier books on the Omniverse that are available at universebooks.com or at Amazon or any other place. And you can become familiar with this, and people say, oh, well, that's just like Star Trek. And see, you know, in a certain way, Star Trek and things were like to introduce us to the fact that we live in a populated and organized cosmos. And yeah, you know, here on Earth, you know, we have governments, and you just can't go out and build the house. And, you know, in a city, you have to go get a building permit and things like that. And it's the same way in an organized cosmos. There's, you know, all sorts of interactive things. We're on a very, very complex planet with a complex and difficult history. And we've been sort of in a quarantine because of that, but it's, you know, it's understandable, but it's challenging. And so what we're doing is mapping that and sharing it. And that's what we're doing.
Now, when it comes to our history, do you think there is any accuracy to the Sumerian mythos or the interpretation of the Sumerian tablets to as the Anunnaki came and genetically modified us and used us as a slave race? Do you think that there's any accuracy to that whatsoever?
Yeah. Okay. That's a very interesting question. And the short answer is yes. The larger context, I think, and for backup on this, people can go to our YouTube channel, which is Exopolitics TV. You can go to youtube.com/Exopolitics TV, all one word. And there's 12 million views there, and there are 54,000 subscribers, and there are many, many in-depth interviews with experts on this, experts on the exopolitics of our planet. And in exopolitics, we use a combination of sources, of historical sources, including communications with other civilizations. And in dealing with the history of our planet, what are particularly important, I believe, or can be given extra weight, are those civilizations which are members of the Regional Galactic Governance Council, and that is the Governance Council of planets of advanced upper dimensional human civilizations, civilizations like us, but more advanced, that in fact can be said to have created us and overseen us within the limits of the law of non-interference, which the Anunnaki violated. And so it's from that we have a more advanced view. Now, all of the views that we have should be taken with a grain of salt, because we're putting them together. We don't have completed views because we're in the public domain, and we've had contact with other civilizations as contactees, as exopolitical researchers. We've interviewed and exchanged views with deep insiders inside the deep state, that, or whistleblowers from the deep state, that have been part of human extraterrestrial liaison programs, and they give a big part of the picture also. So all of this is kind of a mosaic that we put together, and then we document them in our books. And so as a student of that, you can read the books, you can listen to what we say and listen to others, and then you can form your own picture. That's probably the best way to do. And so to answer your question, the best sort of the working model of how humans got here, how Earth humans got here, one good working model, which we have on authority from the Syrians, the Pleiadians, the Alpha Centaurians, and the Syrians from Sirius, and maybe 5 other civilizations form what we call the Regional Galactic Governance Council that govern this sector of the galaxy. And they were responsible for the development of this version of the human being, basic. And we were initially, that is on Earth, and we were initially developed as a 12-strand DNA light being in the 3rd dimension, which is a very, very special thing. In other words, we were originally developed to exist in the 3rd density in time-space, but with 12-strand DNA. So we would be like, almost like enlightened masters in the 3rd density, if I can use, kind of an analogy. And in fact, what occurred is that we had a violation of the law of non-interference by the Anunnaki reptilians, who some say 250,000 years ago, some say 450,000 years ago, somewhere in that time envelope, there was, I would call it a social catastrophe, an Omniverse catastrophe that took place in this region of the galaxy, because it took place in the spiritual dimensions, and then it took place exopolitically, that is, in the extraterrestrial regions. In the spiritual dimensions, we had a rebellion by high beings, by sort of the high angelic beings who were in charge of this region in the universal governance, because the Omniverse and this whole system of creation is based on free will. And that is that it's not automatic. You know, we're given free will, and that's what gives creativity. And that's one of the high values that's given here. And with free will becomes the capacity to enter into error, to choose between good and not good, to do right and wrong, to do service to self and service to others, all of these different things. And to make a long story short, there was a rebellion that had repercussions all at the different levels. At the highest level, it was led by what can be called the fallen angels, but a whole series of high spiritual beings that underwent a transformation in which they said, we're going to break off and we're going to set up our own kind of God kingdom here. And they have historical names that have, you know, that are in our sacred texts, Lucifer, Satan, Caligastia, all of these names that are, say, in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, are actually historical names that were involved in the dimensional ecology of the Omniverse that's involved in this sector of universe reality, multiverse reality, Omniverse reality. So it affected all of the souls that were incarnating here, all of the universes that were involved in this. And they set themselves up as kind of God. And so it was a spiritual war. And for example, the Star Wars series begins to talk a little bit about that, you know, to give us a flavor of that. So for the last 250,000 years, we've had kind of a Star Wars situation in this sector of the galaxy. And our particular planet has been in various states of quarantine because in the midst of this war, we have been quarantined off at various levels, at various higher dimensions and densities, so that the, quote, rebellion wouldn't spread. In other words, they would cut it off so it wouldn't go out and take over the whole universe. And as part of that, we who were created as light beings in the third density, 12-strand DNA light beings in the third density, were, through a lot of treachery and manipulation, the Luciferian rebellion, we were devolved down into two-strand DNA, and down into societies of cause and effect, duality consciousness, I win, you lose, and into an earth of war, disease, crime, and poverty, which is the world that we're in now. And the testaments, for example, the book of Genesis treats that symbolically as falling out of the Garden of Eden, and what it means is just devolving from a 12-strand DNA down to a 2-strand DNA and coming under this kind of Luciferian, demonic, diabolical. Now, along with that, there were various exopolitical wars going on, synchronistically, interspecies, Draco-reptilian versus human, and the Draco-reptilian attack against the original humans in the Lyra constellation, and essentially alliances. The Draco-reptilians attacked Lyra. We're part of the diaspora of the humans throughout the galaxy, and the Draco-reptilians joined in an alliance with the Luciferian rebellion, along with the Orion Greys, along with entities like a sentient, inorganic artificial intelligence. This is an artificial intelligence that is plasma-based, and it's inorganic, and it's invaded our planet. And so it's invaded other planets in this region successfully, and when it does so, it takes over that planet so that that planet is no longer a venue for the incarnation of souls. So we have been at effect of that rebellion and at effect of that DNA devolution for about 250,000 years. Now, there's been a lot of exopolitical activity, very, very intense. One of the major markers that occurred about 2,000 years ago. Reportedly, I'm just using words so that people understand that this is the result of research and hypothesis, and that is when a being, when the Christ being incarnated here and essentially claimed Earth on behalf of the universe governance, and then we awakening ones are like the first line that's coming in and reclaiming the planet, and as we awaken, we have the opportunity and we can activate our DNA so it can go from 2-strand DNA to 4-strand to 6-strand to awaken our consciousness. And that's the process that's going on now. And it's met with a lot of resistance because the power structures in Earth are also, many of the power structures are controlled by reptilian souls that are incarnated as humans that control the political structures, control the financial structures, control the media structures. So it's an ongoing process, but that's the process of the awakening and the transformation. And so what we try to do is just to articulate what's going on, to share the science of what's going on, but the planet itself, we believe, is raising itself in vibration, as is the whole sector. And there's that philosophy that a rising tide raises all boats. So all of us are kind of rising with it, and that we're moving back toward an evolutionary positive future, and with a lot of good things in store. And if one can just, not get caught up in individual day-to-day hiccups that are happening out there, but just look at the positive and really, keep focus on that. Earth is on a positive timeline. We're on a positive timeline, headed toward a utopian future. And that's what Earth is on. And people can go to our website in that regard, called positivefuture.info, and we have several articles there that lay out different time science and the different equations that show why Earth is on a positive future. And so
I do see, I notice a lot of more people are waking up. I see people questioning the system. I do see things slowly starting to change. And I also see that the ones in control, the powers that be, also see this, and they're trying to combat it. And I think that their form of trying to combat this would be transhuman agendas, the rollout of 5G, things like that. Is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, and so, yeah, exactly. So that's why it's so important that we continue just to educate and to bring out as much light as we can, to show that we are on a positive future, and that it's not a genocidal future. One of the key things is that the strategy that we call them the Draco reptilian forces, and the reason why we say that is this: that the United States has signed a series of secret treaties with the Draco reptilians and Orion Greys, starting with Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1933 in a battleship in Balboa, Panama. Then 1948, Harry S. Truman. Then 1954, Dwight Eisenhower signed the Greada Treaty, and then followed by the Town 9 Treaty signed by George H.W. Bush, George Bush the first. And what these treaties did is that they set up an infrastructure whereby the United States, in essence, became the proconsul of the Draco reptilians on planet Earth, with 175 military bases, and essentially implementing the Draco reptilian agenda, which is to set up a slave system for humans, to deal in pedocriminal slave commerce. We have whistleblowers from military bases that say that every month they have to deliver crates, so many crates of human babies in canned, tinned human baby food to the Dracos. The pedocriminal trafficking on Earth, the pedocriminal trafficking in the solar system of children, and the pedocriminal of human children, pedocriminal trafficking in the galaxy. That commerce is what is set up by these secret treaties. Not only that, human trafficking. Some of the figures that have been mentioned is that there are 60 million human slaves that are working at industrial facilities set up under these treaties in the solar system. And our reporting, you can go to exopolitics.com and you'll see some of our reporting as early as 2011. We have actual photographs of industrial sites on Mars that are slave labor sites that are staffed by humans that were brought there under false pretenses. 60 million humans, like they'll go and they say, oh, come on tomorrow, you're going to get a great engineering job, and then you end up there in these slave labor facilities producing products for what's called the secret space program, for export to outside the solar system, in the solar system. And these facilities are partially owned by these Luciferic elites like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. I once had Governor Winthrop Rockefeller, who's part of these elites, gang stalk me in the faculty lounge of the Yale Law School because they had brought back one of my books via secret time travel from 2005 when it was published back to 1971. So they knew that I was going to come out and talk about this. But his family is totally involved, along with the Rothschilds, along with the Nazis. I like to call them NOT-SEE, Nazi. They don't see. They don't have eyes to see or ears to hear. And they have allied themselves with the Luciferian rebellion, with that alliance of the Draco Reptilians and the Orion Greys, with a headquarters in Antarctica, on the moon, and on Mars, and with the exploitation of humanity as a slave race. And they treat all the rest of us, even those of us who are on the planet, as slaves, where we are wage slaves, or, a lot of us can just barely make it because, they grab everything that you do. And you can go chapter and verse after that. Mothers whose babies, we have done interviews with pregnant mothers who are targeted as they go into the hospitals to give birth, and then their babies are taken right after birth under false pretenses, and the mothers are targeted and said to be mentally unstable, and they just take their babies, and their babies go into the pedocriminal traffic, which is led by the Dracos under the treaties with the U.S. military and the CIA that runs this entire enterprise. That is part of the Lucifer Rebellion. Now, the good news is this. The Lucifer Rebellion is over. It's over. Lucifer has been tried and executed. So the kingpin of the rebellion is no longer. And all that's happening now is we have the Luciferian farm, is continuing. It's like the gulags are continuing, but they don't have that cosmic energy anymore. And I just returned from Barcelona, Spain, just a few days ago. Today's September 12th. I returned on September 10th, 2019. And I delivered a message there in a lecture and a workshop. The lecture was in a hall that held 1,000 people. So it was pretty, it was amazing. I mean, it was the largest crowd that I've ever spoken to. And it was about this. There's a famous Brazilian medium and prophet called Chico Xavier. And he sold in his lifetime, he sold 40 million copies of his books. All the profits, he gave it to charity because he said that he didn't write those books, rather the intelligence that came through him wrote them. And his prophecy was that on July 20th, 1969, a great power came down and said, look, we're going to give humanity 50 more years. And if by July 20th, 2019, World War III has not occurred, World War III will not, there will be no World War III. And what's more, humanity is going to join the community of worlds. And on that day, there will be sightings of spacecraft, of our extraterrestrial spacecraft, okay? Well, by the way, July 20th, 1969 is the date that the United States reportedly landed on the moon. So, which is not, the moon is not a rock, it's an extraterrestrial satellite and occupied by 6 ET races. And on July 20th, 2019, 50 years there, we interviewed the witnesses that were at a sacred Sundance on Lakota territory of the Lakota tribe in the Pine Ridge Reservation. And 3 spacecraft came down on that Sundance. And the witnesses that we interviewed said that that was a fulfillment. And not only that, a very famous contactee from Spain, Hermes, just sent to me, I just downloaded them today, excuse me, a spectacular series of UFO sightings occurred over Barcelona, Spain, which I'm going to publish on Exopolitics TV shortly, and you'll see them. And if you go to Exopolitics TV, you'll see the interviews with the witnesses of the July 20th, 2019 land, sightings of the extraterrestrial spacecraft, and the accompanying articles on our newspaper, newsinsideout.com, have the photographs. We weren't allowed to photograph the sacred Sundance because that's prohibited by the Lakota. But we have photographs of their private ceremonies where they permitted them. It's called the hoop dance, where they were dancing in all of their regalia. And so it seems like the the 50-year prophecy by Chico Javier has been fulfilled, and that is there's going to be no World War III, and humanity is going to join the peaceful galactic community of worlds, which means the Regional Galactic Governance Council. We're going to join back up to the Sirians, the Alpha Centaurians, the Pleiadians, and the others, which means that the Lucifer rebellion is over. So it's the closing of the circle, and our DNA is now being healed by that. We are now coming back up to advanced 4-strand DNA, 6-strand DNA. The younger generation that's coming up, they call them crystal kids. They have 6-strand DNA, 8-strand DNA. That's why they're so bright. You know, they can't even fit into our school system because they're crystal kids. They're actually ETs. And so it's this whole positive thing. Now, let me add even one more thing. I don't know how we're doing for time because I see that it's 9 o'clock, so I don't know how you want to do for time.
Yeah, we have probably about 15 more minutes or so that we can do.
Okay. I just want to mention this one more thing, which we saw at the Ufology World Congress, where we were in Barcelona, Spain, from September 6th to 8th, 2019. And this was a presentation by the famous Mexican ufologist Jaime Maussan. He showed, because he's of a major TV channel in Mexico, and he showed the actual videos of December 19th, 2018, where an extraterrestrial UFO in the shape of a pyramid as tall as the Pentagon landed over the Pentagon and stood there for an hour from 3 to 4 a.m. on the night of December 19th, 2018. And it was amazing because he went and interviewed a musician and a friend of theirs from Ireland who were coming back from a party, and they were in a taxi, and they saw it. So they said to the taxi, just drive around, and they filmed it. They filmed it with their phones, and then they took pictures of it. So we saw the actual UFO. It was amazing. And then we had other witnesses. This Czechoslovakian photographer and his wife also saw that. And that was the same type of pyramid, which is as tall as the Pentagon. It's amazing. Appeared in Red Square in Moscow in January of 2011. Now, I interviewed the contactee, who was a Canadian NORAD officer, who in 2010, in the summer of 2010, he predicted that the Regional Galactic Governance Council would decloak its vehicles over New York City, over the United Nations, on October 13th, 2010. And I interviewed him in the summer, and then on October 13th, 2010, there were these UFOs over New York and over the UN, and that was the day before the UN Outer Space Committee was scheduled to meet to discuss the protocols of what the UN would do if they ever encountered ETs and ET landings. And then I interviewed him afterward. He was unfortunately assassinated in December with a fast-acting cancer. However, the sightings continued, and in January, as I mentioned, the same type of pyramid, the size of the height of the Pentagon, landed in Red Square. And in Russia, they do things differently. They put that on the evening news. And so we saw that in Barcelona on the evening news. The same pyramid that we saw from the taxi where we were going around the Pentagon, we saw on the evening news in Russia. And not only that, in Russia, on the trains, on the regular trains, they have balls of light, UFO balls of light that follow the trains, and the passengers video them, and they put those on the evening news. There's more openness in Russia about UFO contact than there is in America. Now, let me just kind of bring it full circle, because I know we only have about 10 minutes. All of those, including the contact in the Lakota territories on July 20th, 2019, are contacts of the Regional Galactic Governance Council, which are the Pleiadians, the Alpha Centaurians, the Syrians, and others, and they are our brethren. And they are now, this is like an ET landing in slow motion. They land in 2010, they land in 2011, and now in 2019, they landed over the Pentagon. And in May of 2019, the U.S. Navy finally released films of a U.S. Navy pilot saying, yep, that's extraterrestrials. And the reason that they did that is that they had this huge pyramid landing on top of the Pentagon saying, you guys, give it up. You guys better start disclosing. So that happened in December 19, 2018, and in May 2019, the Pentagon said, guess what? We're going to give it up. Here you go.
Now, that being said, do you think anytime in the near future that we're going to get, full disclosure, admittance to what's going on? And do you think in our lifetime that we're going to see our societies working together? We're going to see a peaceful society. We're going to see some of these free energy things that they've been holding back from us. Do you see any of this happening within our lifetime to kind of end us on?
Well, I have to admit to you that I am an optimist. There are many people out there that are skeptical. There are many people out there that are working against us, but I'm an optimist. I think that the Regional Galactic Governance Council wants it to happen. The universe wants it to happen. The universe governance wants it to happen. The issue is time. Who knows what the time is, but I think it's going to happen. And we have, and so the more that each of us becomes sort of a beacon of openness about this, and we sort of upgrade ourselves so that we become part of the Regional Galactic Governance Council and take our citizenship in this galaxy seriously, individually, I think that that's going to accelerate it. So, we start reading up about it, start looking at the videos, start thinking about it, Don't let all these skeptics put you down. Start looking at the December 19th, 2018 Pentagon, UFO over the Pentagon, and connect those dots, because they can be connected. That's why all these discoveries are coming through now. The discovery of the Omniverse, the exopolitics, it's all coming in so that we have this infrastructure. And yeah.
Yeah, very well said. And tonight we barely scratched the surface of stuff we could have talked about, so I'm definitely going to have you back on soon.
Well, thank you very much.
And that was great, so you have an excellent night.
Well, thank you.